Let's get ready to ramble. We got all the raccoons here. We're gonna have a really super fun night of raccoon feeding, and we're gonna talk mental toughness. So let me ask you this, have you ever struggled to make a big decision? Because tonight's topic is gonna be all about how to evaluate a decision from all angles and map out all your choices to make your decisions with the best form possible. We're going to be basing tonight's talk off the book Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath. They did all the research on how to make decisions the best way possible. So this is going to be useful if you're considering a new purchase like a house or a car, or considering getting a pet, considering getting into a relationship or moving in with somebody, or if you're thinking of leaving a relationship, if you're thinking of starting a business or buying a business or selling your business, if you're thinking of taking a new job or leaving your job, whatever it is, for all big decisions, this is going to be the process we go through tonight. And these little masked bandits are going to join us. This is Raccoon Rambles. My name is Brendan. And if you don't know, I'm a mental toughness coach, and I also post a lot of nature videos. Let's have a lot of fun out there tonight feeding these little rascals. It's time to ramble. Look what I got. Do you like this? Oh my gosh, that's a big bowl of food, isn't it? Someone's in my seat today. I set out some peanut butter sandwiches for them. Oh, here you go. Here, come on back. I guess little rascal there thought she was going to lead the talk tonight. That was cute. Okay, so tonight's Raccoon Ramble is all about making big decisions with good form. And we got all these little bandits to help you and I for this process and walk us through it. I even set out some peanut butter sandwiches for them, but before the camera was even rolling, they got into them. So, step number one is, before you ever make any big decision in life, make sure you're in a good state of mind. When people are at very heightened emotional states, they tend to make bad decisions. So make sure you're in a good, even-minded state before you really contemplate your big decisions here. Now there's 4 basic steps that Chip and Dan Heath outline that we need to go through in order to responsibly make a big decision. And I'm going to walk you through all 4. So step number 1 is to widen your options. So we want to get out of black and white thinking, zebra vision, as you might call it. And we want to think of the gray area in between. So a lot of times people think all or nothing, yes or no, but we want to create some and options. Now there's a number of different ways to do this. One technique is called vanishing options. So, let's say you're not allowed to choose between your 2 choices. Let's say you're deciding whether you're going to stay where you currently live or you're going to move to a new town. Let's say the town is Hamilton, Ontario. Okay? That's your options. Do you stay where you're living in Toronto, or do you move to Hamilton? Well, imagine you can't do either. You might decide, well, if I can't move to Toronto and I can't move to Hamilton, I might move to a place like Waterdown, which is in the Hamilton area, which is actually a really nice place. Boom! All of a sudden we have a new option out there. So vanishing options is all about take away all your options and see what else you can come up with. You know, another example might be if you're considering taking a promotion at work or not. You know, imagine you can't do either. Maybe you go into entrepreneurship. You just create a new option out of thin air. There's a really interesting story about Post-it notes. Now, you might know what Post-it notes are. They're the little square notes, and you stick them on things. You write a little note, you can stick them on, and you can easily peel them off your workplace and whatever with little memos and stuff. Now, originally they were trying to develop a really strong adhesive glue, and it didn't work. So they could be like, look, the experiment failed. Do we try again to create this super strong adhesive glue, or do we abandon the project? And imagine you can't do either. You can't try again, you can't abandon the project. Well, now you got a weak glue after the experiment failed. So they decided, let's come up with a whole new invention with this weak glue. Because Post-it notes, as they were, ended up being, are perfect. You don't want something that's too strong and adhesive. You want something that just stick enough. You can keep it around your workplace. So that's an example of a success that came from vanishing options. Come on. Another thing we might do to widen our options is we might think, how can we combine these choices? So let's say you're in a job, you're working, and you really want to go out on your own with your own business. Well, maybe you stay in your job and you do your own business on the side. That's a way to combine options. Or let's say you're a manager and you have an employee who works in the sales department, but this employee is really shy, they're not doing well, right? Instead of like deciding to fire them or keep them in their current position, you might think, let's keep them, but let's take them out of their current role and let's give them more of an administrative job that they might be better at, that their personality's better suited for. So now we're just coming up with new ideas instead of black or white thinking. So sometimes we're given options. We're given like sales package options or job package options, and we may be given a few different options. We can always negotiate for a third option. We can always negotiate for an additional option to what we've been offered. And that's what this is all about. We can always try to create more options, widen our options, because sometimes the best option is the gray area in between. It's not the black or white. We want to get out of that zebra thinking. So that's step one in making a big decision. Step two is to reality test your assumptions. So we want to just dip our toes in the water before diving in head first. It's really important to do this stuff ahead of time and reality test our assumptions. As Frank Lloyd Wright said, he said something to the effect of, it's easier to just use an eraser at the drawing board than use a sledgehammer at the construction site. Okay, so we want to test these assumptions rather than letting overconfidence get us carried away and getting overcommitted in the wrong direction. One example was the Segway. You might know the Segway, it's kind of like a stand-up scooter. When the Segway was being invented, they thought, oh, everybody who delivers mail is going to want to use this. We've got a market. And what happened is, after they went through with the development of this product, nobody who does mail wanted to use it because the battery doesn't last long enough for them to do a route. They just have to keep recharging it. And that was a major oversight. They had no idea till they'd already really committed to this product that it just wasn't practical for the market they had targeted. They just didn't test it enough. So now it's just used for recreational purposes. There was also a case when JCPenney decided to use like really fair pricing. Instead of putting things on sale and discount, they just gave you the low rates. and they priced it that way. They just said, we want fair, straightforward, low pricing. And it actually didn't work, because one of the things they didn't realize is that customers like to feel like they're winning. So they like to say, look how much I saved. Look at these deals and bargains I got. Even if they inflated the price artificially and then just discounted it after 2 weeks, people like to psychologically feel like they're winning. And that was something they didn't really foresee. The Ford Pinto car came out in Brazil, I believe it was, and sales went really poor. The Ford Pinto car sales went really poor. Why? Because they named it Pinto. And Pinto in the Brazilian Portuguese apparently means small male genitals. So no guys wanted to buy that car with that name. So we need to reality test our assumptions. And there's a number of ways we want to do this. Now, for one, we want to speak to a trustworthy guide who can give us information about these things. So for example, let's say you're considering buying an entrepreneurial business. A trustworthy guide might tell you, find out how many different secretaries they've had in the past 2 years. And if it's more than 3 or 4, that's a big red flag for that business. Who would have known? That's something we don't know that we needed to know. It might say a lot about the operations and how they treat their people. A trustworthy guide can give you realistic success rates, realistic timelines. If you're building a house, somebody might tell you it's going to cost 3 times as much as you think, and it's going to take 3 times as long as you think. That can be important information to know before you go all in. Now, another way to do it is to do some research. Really research what you can and verify things. So don't believe everything you read when you research. Really try to verify things. And one of the best ways to reality test our assumptions is to run small experiments. For example, if you're considering starting a job or a career in a certain field, do some job shadowing. I have a buddy, he wanted to be a cop, so he job shadowed, and what he saw and witnessed that day traumatized him, and he decided, I never want to be a cop. Well, it's a good thing you know now. Better you know that sooner rather than later, right? Another thing you can do is, rather than moving somewhere right away, travel there and visit it first. You know, rather than moving in with your boyfriend, maybe you want to just do a little bit of a vacation away with them first to see what they're like when you're around each other all the time. You know, a big decision for a lot of people can be whether or not they're going to get a pet. Well, maybe try babysitting a pet first to see if you can really handle all the duties and responsibilities. If you're thinking of having a kid or not, try babysitting kids. Just take it for a test run and see. You could also, if you're doing a product design, build a cheap, inexpensive prototype just to see how it works out and see what works and what doesn't work before you come out with a final product. You want to think of what are some creative ways you can run some small experiments and test out your options. So the next category, A, is attain emotional distance before making a decision. Once again, it can cloud our judgment and our clear thinking when we are overtaken with emotion. Think of new car smell. People get excited and they want to buy the car right away and they haven't really thought it through maybe. You know? When people are in the height of excitement and passion or lust or anger, they tend to not make well thought out decisions. So we want to zoom out. What do you ultimately want from life? What really matters? Are you looking to make more and profit more in the short term, or are you thinking long term? Are you more interested with your personal development? Are you interested in just realizing your higher potential, or are you in it for just cheap thrills in the short term? Are you in it to provide for your friends and family and love on everybody and set an example of virtue? Are you here to innovate and challenge the status quo? So we want to think about, ultimately, what do you want out of life and what options might best provide for that? Susie Welch has a system you can try out. It's called the Triple 10. Think about your main options right now. How would you feel about each 10 minutes from now? Maybe pretty good, right? How would you feel about each option 10 months from now? And then finally, how would you feel about each option 10 years from now? So this really helps us understand things across time. An important consideration when making a big decision is who else will be involved by this decision and how will it affect them. So you want to think of your loved ones, you want to think of any dependents you might have, but you also want to think about coworkers, teammates. To whatever degree you can, I would encourage you to involve the pack. Get those who will be affected involved in the decision, especially if it's coworkers, because they'll feel a greater sense of ownership and buy-in if they are involved in the decision. Something to think about. Another really cool thing you can try out is called head, heart, gut. Here's what you do. Ask yourself, what does my head say about this decision? And this is what looks best logically. So typically we want to think about what's the best thing to do with our time and money? Or what else could we do with the same time and money? You know, an example given in the book Decisive is somebody was deciding between a $1,000 stereo or a $700 stereo. And they asked the employee who works there, hey, what do you think I should do? And the employee said, why don't you consider getting the $700 stereo and $300 worth of music albums, right? Which is, you know, with the same time and money of the expensive stereo, you get one that's pretty well just as good and get some bonus stuff with it. The next question is, what does my heart say I should do? And this is typically what feels good. What does my heart say I should do? My heart says I should give you a peanut. There you go. And then the final part is, what does my gut say I should do? And our gut typically tells us what feels right. What advice emanates from the core of your being? Most people will say when they're doing head, heart, gut that it was really the gut decision that really tends to work out best for them, ultimately. That's head, heart, gut. Another thing you can do is the best friend test. What would you tell your best friend to do if they were in the same situation as you? Do you think maybe you should take your own advice? Now the fourth and final category is P. Prepare for a future that is unpredictably good or unpredictably bad. Try to be like a master chess player. Imagine the final effects of your decisions before you act. Okay, for example, at one point I was going to invest in a website developer, but then I was advised that, anything were to happen to that website developer, I'd be messed up because I'm so dependent on that one person. So maybe it's best not to go with an individual and rather go with an organization. What you want, baby? You might think, if you've got a certain job option you're considering, what happens if you get sick? Or if you're invested in a certain technology or something, what happens if new technology comes out? And I'll give you a story about that. Does everyone remember Kodak? You know that whole saying, Kodak moment? Do you know what happened to Kodak? Digital photography came out. Now, at some point, there was a board meeting, and it was brought to everyone's attention that digital photography has come out. And so I believe Kodak sent out some surveys, and all of their clients said that they're not really interested in digital photography. They still like having the physical photographs, okay? So Kodak was like, you know what? We don't need to bother getting involved in that space. We're Kodak. We're pretty confident in our choices. Look how good we've been so far. So what happened was digital photography did pick up, and even though people in surveys said they prefer physical photographs, they changed their minds. And that wasn't something Kodak was expecting. And so by the time Kodak got involved in the digital photography space, it was too late and they went bankrupt. Now, this was a major oversight. It was a major lack of prudence because what they should have done is set up a tripwire. A tripwire is something that will trigger an action. So you might say, hey, look, when digital photography takes up 10% of the marketplace, we get in. And that kind of helps us manage risk. Now, here's a funny story that comes from the book Decisive. If you know the band Van Halen, David Lee Roth, when he's going to set up to play anywhere at a venue, in the contract, they say that they want a bowl of M&Ms with no brown M&Ms. So when they show up, one of the first things he does is he checks that bowl to see if there's any brown M&Ms. And if there is, he wants all the stagehands to do a double check over all the setup of everything, because he knows they did not read the details of the contract, which means they probably didn't read the other details of how the venue is supposed to be set up. And he said, you're guaranteed they're going to screw up something technically. So that was his tripwire, and it's brilliant. Van Halen gets total credit on that one. So we want to consider what could go wrong and how can we set up a tripwire. A trigger that gets hit, and when that gets hit, we jump in and change our game plan. The other thing to think about is preparing for a future that's unpredictably good. So there was a company called Minnetonka, and I believe this was in the 1970s, 1977. And they were developing a bunch of different products, and they developed a really cool hand pump for soap. Now, back in the day, everybody was all about bars of soap. Minnetonka thought, you know what? We think that this whole hand pump thing is really going to pick up. So what they did was they ordered so much units of the hand pumps and almost made like an exclusivity thing with the developers of these physical hand pumps so that none of the other big soap companies could get in on it. And then they started selling to the hotels, and the hotels thought this was more hygienic, having a hand pump and everything else. And so things really picked up. And By the time anyone else was able to get into the game with these plastic hand pumps, Minnetonka was already way ahead. So it gave them a significant advantage over the market. That's a huge deal, preparing for a future that's unpredictably good. Kudos to them. Now, here's something to think about. Your choices matter, your decisions matter, because your decisions set in motion a cause and effect that shapes your life and shapes the lives of those you affect. Okay? When you make a choice, it's like aiming a telescope, just shifting it a little bit. You know, it's just a little change here, but the end destination can be thousands of miles different in terms of what it's focused on. So you got to remember that your life and your legacy is ultimately the result of the choices you make. So make them wisely. We can't be sure of the final outcomes of anything, good or bad, but we can be sure that we did our due diligence in considering and evaluating our options. I would also submit to you that in the end, there's no good and bad decisions, because you'll get learning lessons no matter what. And that's all that matters. Okay, you're going to get learning lessons. Just like I'm about to get learning lessons because I ran out of food and now I'm covered in raccoons. All that matters is that you're going to get learning lessons no matter what. So you can't really go wrong with any choice and decision. Eventually you'll develop wisdom through all your experiences as long as you're reflecting, and you'll make better and better choices in future and create more happiness and joy for yourself. Okay? So use this process, this RAP process. Widen your options. Reality test your assumptions. Attain emotional distance. Prepare for a future that's unpredictably good or unpredictably bad. Use this for all your big decisions so you can have confidence moving forward that you aren't overlooking anything. And then just know that whatever happens, you can find a way to learn your lessons and make the best of it. No pressure. This has been another round of rambles. I gotta get out of here because they're pawing me to death looking for food. I gotta go. Oh, you're just gonna hold my hand? Oh, there's this like begging. Oh, you're gonna nibble my finger. Don't nibble my finger. I'm gonna make a big decision to go inside right now and get them a bunch of food. How about that? This has been Raccoon Rambles. You have my honor and respect and love no matter what. We're all in this human experience thing together, sending positive vibes your way. Love you forever. And you too. Okay, let me go get you some food. Come on.